everyone, and welcome to the channel. Today I'm going to be talking about a book that took me 274 days to finally finish, and that is The Ships of Merior by Janny Wurts. I started this book, I believe it was November 22nd of 2020, and I finally finished it on August 24th of 2023. So this has definitely been a journey, and it has been a long time coming. If you have watched my channel, this has been on every TBR and every wrap-up saying I haven't finished it, but I have finally done it. And overall, I had a really good time with this book. I ended up giving it a 4-star rating. If you don't know anything about this series or this book, this is book 2 in The War of Light and Shadow by Janny Wurts. And basically we follow the conflict of two cursed brothers and there's actually a lot more, but that's the basic premise. We follow two brothers who are warring against each other, and there's all kinds of different things going on in there. One thing I discovered in those 200, almost 300 days is that this book is absolutely a mood read for me. I have to be in the mood to read this book, and I will get into some of that, but I'm going to continue to refer to this book and this series in general, I think, as the ultimate mood read, because if you're not in the mood to read it, at least for me personally, I found it very difficult to read. But let's get into my likes and dislikes, and we'll talk about it there. So my first like is going to be the scale that this series is happening on. And maybe that's a little unfair to this book to give it all this credit, but there are so many things happening and at different paces that this story is immense. I'll go ahead and say this, that this is a story that is going to span hundreds of years, with many different characters and many different factions having their own things that they want to accomplish throughout this tale. And to me, that's a huge positive, and it also will come into being a negative slightly further on into this video. But for the most part, I can really appreciate that Janny Wurts is really crafting a massive story that is going to include things that I probably can't even think of right now. She does a really good job of laying breadcrumbs to lead you to where you think the story is going to go, and then also delivering on that. And there are some things that I think she hinted to in this book that I am going to really look forward to in the form of some magical creatures. And yeah, so I mean, it's a huge bonus. This is an 11-book series, so going into it knowing that it is very expansive and everything that goes along with that, I don't know, it's just a huge positive for me. The next positive is definitely going to be the thematic work in here. This story really does a good job of painting pretty much everybody in a light that shows that they think they're correct. And I think that's a very interesting thing to do, because there are some stories, and I don't have a problem with these stories either, but there's a very clearly good side and a bad side. There's the big bad, the bad guy, the evil ruler, the Lord ruler, as in Mistborn. But this series, our main characters, one of them doesn't think they're doing anything wrong. They feel like they are incredibly justified in the actions they are taking, whether or not those actions are misguided or that belief is misguided. And it really shows the diversity that Janny is able to, put into this story, and, make you think about why this character's motivations are what they are, and how realistic it is. Most people don't think they're the bad person when they're doing something that the other perspective sees as wrong. And, that just really makes the story feel very alive, that you have these, it's not even morally gray. It is just people doing what they think is right, even if other people don't think it is. And it's just really well done. And there are a couple of different instances of characters in here doing that. Obviously, one of our main characters is a really good illustration of that. They are rousing armies and uniting people in the hope of revenge and retribution. And the fact that they don't see the harm that they have committed themselves, or that they see it as justified. I mean, it's just really well done, and it really just puts a different perspective, in fantasy where so many times it's very black and white. Along with that thematic work, I kind of touched on the characters, but the characters in this book are really my favorite part of the book. I don't think you're supposed to, I think this would probably be a hot take, but Lysair is definitely my favorite character. I find him to be extremely interesting, partially because of that thematic work. He's the one who is doing some very questionable things, but doesn't really see the negatives, or he feels so justified in what he's doing. And he is just such an amazing character. The other main character, Arathon, some of the romantic relationship aspects that happen in this book with another character is just some of the most beautiful romance written, and not in like the hot, steamy kind of way, but just in like laying their souls bare to each other and really just like having this deep connection together. I mean, it was just absolutely fantastic. And that is, man, that scene is just, it's heartbreaking what goes on. And it's a scene that I will probably remember forever. I just really love that scene. It's super beautiful. And also side characters are very well built up in this world. We have, a faction of wizards who we don't even spend a lot of time with, but you just get to see what they're doing, some of the things that are going on, and you feel connected to them. You feel connected with all these different groups, and it's just really well done. And some of the characters that were introduced into this book aren't even in it for all that much time. There's a set of twins and their mother that you just feel for so quickly. There's tragedy that has struck their family, and you just end up feeling for them so quickly and understanding why Arathon ends up doing some of the things he feels like he needs to do at the end of this book. And that character work is it is the best part of the series, and I can't wait to continue on and see the journey that some of these characters go on. And now we will get to my last positive, but it's also a negative, so I'm going to kind of start that here. And might be a little controversial, but I think the prose is both this book's biggest strength and also its biggest weakness. And part of that goes into why I feel like this is such a mood read. Because if I am not in the mood to read the prose of this book, I just can't. It takes attention that, a lot of series don't have. The way it is written, the vocabulary used, it's very different than a lot of modern fantasy. And it's definitely not spoon-fed to you. And I have said in the past that when I'm reading it, it really takes like 110% of my brain power to make sure I'm not missing things. I can skim through this and not put as much effort into it, but I will not enjoy the story as much as I do that, and I'm definitely going to miss things. And there were times where I would sit down and think I wanted to read this. I get 2 or 3 pages in and just be like, today is not the day. And part of that is why it took me so long to read. I felt like sometimes I just needed breaks, or I just was not in the mood to consume a story that asked as much as this book does from the person reading it sometimes. I know I have heard other people talk about how beautifully worded and well written this is, and there are probably people who appreciate it on a level that I just never will. Prose has never been something that I've really gravitated towards, and I will say that there are some very beautiful passages in here, and then sometimes I just don't care, and I just kind of want us to get moving a little bit. This is a 700-page book, and for some people, they are going to feel like this is an eternity reading. And there were times where I felt like that. There were times where I would look, and I felt like I had been reading forever, and yet I had made no progress. And I think for some people who get into this series, they might struggle with that. But there are plenty of people who are also going to get into the series, read the prose, and just absolutely fall in love with it. So for me, it went both ways. There were some times where, the writing was just so beautiful and just nothing else I had ever read. And then there were other times that I just needed us to get going a little bit. So that is my first and last negative positive there. Let's go ahead and move on to the next one, which is the fact that this definitely does feel like half of a story. And that makes sense because the way this story is written, and I probably need to double check, but the series is written into like arcs almost. And I think this is only the first half of like this little arc that is going on in the series. And I'm pretty sure if you get the hardcover edition of this book, it actually includes this and the third book, War Hosts of Vastmark. And so maybe if you read it in that format, it doesn't feel as disjointed. But we definitely have like a climax and everything, but there just seems like there's a lot more left for some of the things that were going on. There are just trails that we saw major actions for, but they haven't been resolved yet. And I know that happens in most series. Like, yeah, you have to want to read the next book. But this in particular really felt like there was a lot more that was going to happen. Even in the very last couple of chapters, there are things done that feel like, well, that should be a part of this story. And I guess technically it is, but because I haven't read that book yet and that I'm only judging this book by itself, I can't include, what is to come. And so that is going to get put into the negative. So my last negative, I already kind of hinted at this, is, this is a slow story. It is slow. There are major events that do happen, but sometimes it really does feel like we took the longest time possible to get to those points. And some of that all just kind of gets wrapped into, do you like the prose and how much do you like this big world? But there was definitely, I felt like, a little fat in this book that could have been trimmed out. Overall, I think I will come to appreciate it as I get deeper on into the series. But I don't think it's that crazy to say that for a lot of people, this is going to feel like, I don't know, you could have chopped 150 pages out. And some of that does come down to the prose and some of the very purple prose and everything. But, you know, this is a slow burn. And that was another reason why I struggled with reading it, is because sometimes I just wanted something a little bit faster paced. I don't mind that it's a slow story. Like I said, I did give this book 4 stars, which means I really liked it. So, you know, but there were sometimes just bits of it where I was like, let's go. And it's crazy because when Wurts gets to the action, it's so well done. Like the climax of this book and the previous book are just amazing. I mean, it's some of the best stuff you'll read. It's action-packed, fast-paced, crazy stuff is happening. Consequences, life, death, all of the things you want in a big action kind of thing. But just know that that's not the main point of this book. And I'm putting it in the negatives, but it's really just kind of how I feel overall, that this is slow. I shouldn't call it a negative, even though I feel like, you know, a lot of people will say a slow book is kind of a negative. So that's just kind of where I feel on that. I am very much looking forward to continuing the series. I don't know when I will. I'm not going to promise. I will say I do not think it will take me another 275 days to finish the next book. One, it is like 250 pages shorter or something like that. And also, I just am really invested in the series at this point. After the first book, I was kind of borderline, and even about halfway through this book, I was still kind of on the fence of, is this a series I'm going to continue? And unless book 3 really just drops a ball, which I don't think it will, this is going to be my new long-running series. So that is a very nice thing to have in my wheelhouse. But that is all for me. Let me know any thoughts you have below in the comments, and as always, have a good one.